I think we're going to give just one more minute. I think there's a few people still wandering back in, so. Did you get some coffee? Good. It's coffee o'clock, yeah. Good. All right, friends, we are back. I really enjoyed hearing from some of you over the break, too, about what you are loving about your church, what you see as a value. And what I hope that is starting to bubble up is the excitement that I'm also hearing as well. I hope you're feeling that, because I think when we start to look at what is so beautiful about the part of the body of Christ we belong to, i.e. our individual churches, it can be motivating. It's like, who doesn't want to invite somebody to this church, a place where we are growing in perseverance, in joy, in diversity and uniqueness? Who doesn't want that in this day and age? I think it's so, so important. So we're going to spend this part, this is more of our workshop session. It's a chance for you to start putting some pen to paper of how we're going to use this lived history of your own blood memory in your congregation and put it into practice with your own charisms that the Holy Spirit has given you. One of the things I'm very convinced about is that we are given these things, not just these gifts from the Spirit, not just for ourselves, but because the world desperately needs it. And one of the things that ends up happening in a values conversation, a virtues and strengths conversation, is we make it really excited about what makes these churches so great, but then we don't really know what to do with that, right? It's one thing to name a value, it's another thing to live it such that it brings people to our churches. So if you have a piece of paper, I'm going to give you a couple of questions I'd love for you to write down. Go ahead and take out a piece of paper. And I would almost recommend writing it on the back of the piece of paper that looks like this, that has the icon of Jesus in the boat. So you have all your notes in one place. Here's your first question. What traditions in our church bring us joy? What traditions in our church brings us joy? That's question one. All right. What traditions bring us joy? Second question. How have we been resilient in past challenges? How have we been resilient in past challenges? The last one. In what ways do we uniquely serve our community? In what ways do we uniquely serve our community? This is another way of putting that same question from earlier. What would happen if we weren't here, right? What would happen if we weren't here? Now, you're going to spend some time with those questions in a moment. But I hope you can see from them that what we're going to be doing is we're going to be trying to see how we take these values and put them into action. So when you see these questions, you're going to be able to put some concrete things down. And then we're going to go back and ascribe the values to them, almost like categories. So go ahead and answer these questions, and I'll explain how we'll weave those together. Take some time, and like I said, if you're here with somebody from your church, you can talk to them as well. But go ahead and answer those questions. What traditions bring us joy? How have we been resilient in past challenges? And in what ways do we uniquely serve our community? You'll have a few minutes to do that. just take one more minute. All right. Who wants to start by naming something that is a tradition that brings them joy in their church? Yes, please. Beautiful. So the communion once a month where everybody's sharing together. That sounds like a tradition that'll bring joy. That's amazing. Yes. Absolutely. And what I love, if I may stay with this for a moment, you mentioned that one of your values is uniqueness. And so how do those two things go together? What's unique about that tradition that brings you joy?
Sometimes we can take a meeting together. Yeah. As the only one that is right. And we invite people from the community.
Perfect. It sounds like a little taste of heaven is what it sounds like, as communion is supposed to be. You're doing it right. That's fantastic. Yeah, integration. So you get to take those unique stories all together into one story of Christ. This is beautiful. And what an incredible way to highlight your value and put it into action. That's a very unique gift that you give to one another once a month. And it highlights that value of in such a way that you would want to be able to bring somebody into it. And you already are. You're saying the whole community can come to it. That's evangelism in a nutshell. How beautiful. Thank you. Somebody else. Yes, please.
So we're a village church that has things like Gatsby Days and Christmas in Patuxent. And I didn't realize it until we were just talking. I mean, one of our values is we are a community church.
Yes.
So we open our doors for special services.
Love that.
So Christmas in Patuxent, we come in, we have people in Minuteman uniforms, and they lead us to the town square
Oh.
to light the Christmas tree. What's not to love?
It's charming. That sounds charming.
It's charming, and the congregation takes great pride in being able to open their doors for
Yes.
this kind of thing a couple times a year.
That's fantastic. Remind me one of your core values that can relate to.
Yeah, I know. Well, we talk about leadership and caring,
Leadership and caring. Yes.
but I think the community needs to be there as well.
And you also talked about the shadow side, about how good the lay leadership is and how to bring people into that. And so this is a really great example of how we can start shaping something for evangelism. May I use it for a moment? Okay. What's incredible about this opportunity is that people are even coming to you. It's like you have to go shopping for them. It's coming to you for evangelism. And it also highlights what's so lovely when a church decides to pastor the community. And that's what we call it at my church, really pastoring the community. So to be able to take a moment like that and change it from one of the statistics, remember those community events are about 6%, right? When people are evangelized to, maybe 6% come into the church from those. This would be an incredible thing for you and your vestry to say, we have this unique opportunity. It fits in with our value of being able to pastor the community, as well as I know how well you are at lay leadership. How can we take this and make sure we don't forget to invite people to come to church with it? How can we turn it into an evangelism moment in such a way that it's not like implied? We think just by saying, hey, our church is a part of this, it's an evangelism moment. How do we make the actual ask? And this is where it becomes so crucial. Because you've tied it to your value, people will get excited, or I hope they will, because they know they can achieve it. It's already in their wheelhouse. They already know how to work together to create the event. How can they add an element to something already existing such that it's an actual invitation? So it's a great little workshop. Thank you very much. Somebody else? Yes, please.
So our church has healing services once a month,
Wow.
and then on the winter solstice, there's a special one called Blue Christmas.
Yes.
And anyway, it's reaching out to the community.
Absolutely.
Everyone's invited, and they're really profound.
It sounds profound.
They bring me joy.
Am I correct that Blue Christmas is one that often helps people who are grieving? Yeah. Let me ask you, just by hearing that, is one of your values having to do with healing or the way that you are deeply profound in your spirituality at your church?
Well, one of the ones I wrote down was spirituality, and another one was inclusion.
Wow. So those two values seem to connect. Friends, do you see how great this is? So one of the things that your church does out of its core value is to have these incredible healing services that you could easily invite somebody to. Who amongst us doesn't know somebody who grieves during the holidays? Who amongst us does not know somebody who is in need of healing right now? That's a part of the church that I think is completely undertapped for evangelism. We have a great tradition of healing in Christianity, and I'll say for the last 500 years, in the age of the Enlightenment, many churches like the Episcopal Church tend to kind of downplay it a little bit because they think it's not rational to say that you can pray and help somebody heal. And yet, when we see the statistics on why people are coming to church, it is overwhelmingly nowadays because they're looking for the pastoral offices, the healing rites, things like confession, even, if you can believe it, exorcism. Now, I'm not suggesting you use exorcism as evangelism. However, I don't know what's going on. Bishop, I promise. I'm not getting weird, I promise. But the idea that we're able to say we have something that the Spirit can give to you, and we believe it, that's huge for evangelism. When we see in the Scripture the New Testament church growing, they do it in the way Jesus did, which is evangelism and healing and laying on of hands and having meals together. That's basically what they did. They walked around and they preached the good word through their actions of healing and community. So if we start to embrace those things again more and more, they're out there looking for it. Again, just one more stat about exorcism, not that that's the best evangelism tool. But the Roman Catholic Church, which is the one that keeps stats on these kind of things, has said that in the last 5 years alone, they have watched the request for exorcisms from the larger populace go up, are you ready for this? 700%. Good question. The reason they think it's why is because what I said before, people are looking for the pastoral answer in a very unstable time. Every 500 years, we see these cycles happening within churches, in particular in Christianity, where the main body of how the world used to work isn't quite working anymore. You know, empires crumble. Even something like science, which we love, can't give us all the answers in the face of a pandemic, let's say. So we're right in the middle of a huge shift, and so they are watching the increase that happens at these inflection points, where people start looking for answers that are outside of whatever the mode of answer is of the day. And for us, since the Enlightenment, it's been scientific investigation. Right? So that's why they think. Yeah. So you are giving us the gift of evangelism by living into your value and inviting people to find healing with your deep well of spirituality. That's great. How about one more example of how this all works together? Somebody want to lift up something that they love as a tradition? Yes, please, go ahead. Oh, yeah, go for it. Yes, go for it.
I wrote down celebrations like Easter,
Yes.
and things like that, and the way we decorate our church for it. I mean, Easter, there's lilies all over the place around the altars and the windows. At Christmas time, we have the holly boughs around the altar. We have the garland up. It looks absolutely wonderful.
amazing. I love that. And is there a value that your church is living out with that sort of beauty of holiness?
Well, I mean, putting it together, I use teamwork because everybody works together to make it happen.
Teamwork.
I mean, that Sunday before Christmas, we have coffee hour in our projects, which is about the chickens few. But everybody is in the church doing all that.
How exciting, and living into that value of togetherness. Okay, so you've named both at the beginning and the end of a way that this can be an evangelism moment and how you're living out your value. So one of the things that we do at our church is we have a greening of the church for Christmas, and we find that kids want to be a part of that a lot. And so they invite their friends because they get to, like, stick things on the walls of the church, they get to hang swag. It's just the sort of thing that they find really fun. So the actual teamwork part becomes evangelism for us. But then I've seen other churches, and I hope this doesn't sound crude, but it actually works, where they will use their kind of downtime in between services and let people take pictures with their family. Like if you need a beautiful place to take pictures with your family on Easter or Christmas, they have a little photographer there setting up so that they can take pictures. And then they put a little hashtag St. Christopher's Church right next to it. Now, that might seem a little crude, but on the other hand, you see this on Christmas, people posting pictures everywhere on their Facebook, right, on their social media. Like, why not let the space itself, the hard and beautiful work of letting that be the beauty of holiness, be a call to bring people in, right? And maybe your church is the church people come on Christmas to get their picture taken. That would be fun. Yes, please. That's true, they do. Yep. It's fun. And that is then a huge digital imprint, right? Because everybody wants everyone to see their family looking gorgeous for Christmas. That's great. Thank you. Okay, let's look at another question that we asked. How have we been resilient in past challenges? Anybody have a story from their church for that? How have we been resilient in past challenges? That was question number 2. Yes, please, again, yeah. Or actually, do you mind if we do someone who hasn't spoken yet? Okay, great, go for it right there. Yes. Such a good example. I love that. Thank you so much. The pandemic presented us with a challenging opportunity like we've never had, right? And what you've mentioned, that churches then were able to hopefully become somewhat hybrid, where they were able to, let's say, meet on Zoom or have their church live stream. If that's not evangelism, I don't know what is. Being able to actually let people in on the way we worship here, absolutely, and pray together. Was there a strength that you were lifting up when you were using that? Strength of togetherness, or, yeah. Was there a particular one from your church? Community. So one of your strengths is community. Yes. And you can see that in a moment like that, when we are being resilient together, the community needs to come together, even if it's not in a building, right? So in a church like that, one of the easiest ways to do evangelism is on your website, right? Do you have a website that actually points people to these services where they can actually come together and pray? I'm betting you do, because you have a strong community. Yep. Websites are the easiest welcome mat for your parish there is. We've had people come to St. Christopher's, and they have said that they were nervous to come to church, so they watched the service like 3 or 4 times before they came to church, right? And you can then use parts of your service as other ways of inviting. So we use a little stewardship speaker during stewardship season. And we take that part of the worship service and we put that in the emails that we send out from our church. Like, this person loves St. Christopher's because X. This person loves St. Christopher's because Y. Like that can be another great place where you can not only gather digitally, but then use pieces of that digital content to then evangelize further. You don't have to create your own stuff. You're already doing it, especially with the digital piece. How about one more for resiliency? Where has your church been resilient in the past? Okay. Oh, yes, please, go right ahead. Yeah.
You get really flexible on the time that we have for our church service.
Ooh.
On Sundays now, 12 noon. To either accommodate if we choose also serving at another church, but also in thoughts that there are families that may be able to get their teenagers out of bed.
Yep.
And so we've been really flexible with our time and how we approach church.
I love that. I'm a big believer that limitations create style, right? You know, like having to, or another way to put it is that great example saying that necessity is the mother of invention, right? When you have to be flexible, when you have to figure out different things and timing and how to do things, that actually then may make your church uniquely different than another church. So your church is a church that I can come to when I can't get my kids out of bed at 10 a.m. You know, your church is the church I can come to when I have had a hard night and getting up the next morning might be difficult, but if I could get you by noon, that I could do. And is there a value that you're living out with that type of resiliency?
I think it's survival.
Yeah, survival.
And I think that's the way we've been able to persevere. Our ability to be nimble and flexible has really helped us to help families that hopefully all are building our churches and our ministries.
Absolutely. If we're not willing to be flexible, nimble, creative, then we probably will not be the churches that survive into the future, right? Because now is the time to be able to be that. And it also, I think, speaks to a church that's willing to be open to where the Spirit is leading us. I mean, instead of just being set in one way, we're a church that's open. So it's a beautiful bit of evangelism. Thank you. Okay, that last question. In what ways do you uniquely serve your community? How does your church do that, and how is it living out of value? You gave a good one earlier, actually, yeah. How about somebody else? Did you have one from earlier you wanted to mention?
Well, I would say we have a thrift shop.
Yes.
We run a soup kitchen. And we have an outreach program which helps the formerly incarcerated integrate back into the community.
If your church wasn't there, think of what wouldn't be happening. That's incredible. That's beautiful. And what value is that speaking to? Probably many, but is there a particular one from that list that you think it highlights? Caring, yes, 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 yes. I think it's not an accident when I see churches that have a strong healing ministry, as you mentioned, often have the ability to have a good outreach and ministry. Because there's something about letting the Spirit use you as the body and of Christ to be able to be in the world that it really speaks to both of those things. So when you have you have the soup kitchen, you have the thrift store, and what was the third thing? The incarceration piece, yes? When you have all of those things, how are you able to invite people from the public to be a part of those ministries? Is there a way that they could be involved? With the soup kitchen in particular? Wow. So the idea here then is like if you have an overabundance of volunteers, what's another way that you can get them involved somewhere else, right? Like it's the Spirit might be calling you to do internal evangelism within yourself. How can we grow this ministry to let other people in? That's exciting. That's exciting. What a great opportunity. Friends, what I wanted us to start seeing in all of these examples is the power of seeing your value put into action as a church. The way that the story of our blood memory continues when we can do just that, when we can actually let the rubber hit the road, so to speak. So you have this sheet in front of you, right here. This is the one with Jesus in the boat, if you'll take that out. This is how we're going to try to finish this portion of our time together and put some practices in place. We're going to do a little pruning and a little blooming. We're going to do a little starts and a little stops. I'm going to explain what I mean by all of that. Notice what we've done today. If you were going to take this and bring it back to your church, and start to see how you might form an evangelism plan together. Notice what pieces we've already done today. We've prayed together, we grounded our time together in prayer. We've kept it simple by tapping into your congregation's strengths and values, your spiritual DNA, your blood memory, right? There's a reason we need to keep it simple. Because when we start trying to do all the other things that other churches are doing, we start to get a little cluttered. And there's another reason I had you only choose 5. Because your church, as wonderful as it is, cannot do everything in the whole world that the world needs. It's actually a great way of stewardship to get very clear about the things your church does well, so you can do those, and start to begin to prune what needs to go to let those ministries actually flourish. I don't know about you, but I think it's very tempting for churches to have mission creep, right? Being like, oh, well, this is a good idea, and that's a good idea, and why don't we try this? And we only have so many volunteers. We only have so many things that one church can do in any given day. And so to keeping it simple, to align with your spiritual DNA, so to speak, really helps to make you to make decisions wisely, and so that you can stay nimble, as we mentioned earlier. And then we get to turn to what we're doing right now, which is reviewing your priorities. What things actually must happen in our church, and what are things that we'd like to have, and what are things we need to let go of, right? The bloom, prune sort of mindset. Now, anybody out there who's a gardener knows that if you're going to try to grow something, you actually sometimes have to cut parts of the plant back so that it will actually be able to take the energy from the soil and not just bloom so crazily that it doesn't have enough energy for the winter. My dad was a forester, and he used to talk to me about how trees need to be properly pruned. Otherwise, they can get a little too eager, and they will send a lot of sugar stores in the spring up to make a tree bloom and look beautiful. But come winter, if it's been a dry fall like we've had, they might have used up too much of their sugar stores. Right? That's what we're talking about. We're trying to bloom and prune here in that sort of way. I've given you some priorities of where you might want to be shaping these values. I borrowed those from Crafting a Rule of Life by Stephen Moccia. And it has time, trust, temple, treasure, and talent. Now, you might not think about these things as evangelism opportunities, right? These might sound more like stewardship opportunities. But as I hope you can see, those two things are very interwoven together, right? We can't actually hope to give from a well that we have let run dry. We can't invite people to something that is not, that is too taxing for them to find a foothold into. So what I'd love for you to do in our reminding time together is to spend some time with this time, trust, temple, treasure, and talent, and try to figure out how we actually live into those in a way that matches our values. Like one value for each one of those. So let me give you an example. Time is spiritual practices, right? We've heard some really good example of spiritual practices here. We know, for example, in this church that the spiritual practice of a healing service is really important to this church, not only to the life of the church currently, but the church we're hoping to build into the future and inviting people to. So this spiritual practice is so important, it's time to reinvestigate how we're supporting it. Does it have enough trust in the relationships in the rest of the church that we're making it a priority? Are we giving it physical and even ecological priorities? In other words, is there a space dedicated to it in our sanctuary? Are we making it a financial priority in our budget? And then finally, what sort of talent are we giving to it that makes it a missional priority? When we are that intentional with a ministry that we want to invite somebody to, we are able to become experts in that ministry. This goes back to the earlier worry that we may not know enough when we're trying to evangelize. What this lets us do is say, this ministry is so important to our church, I can tell you exactly when we do it, I can tell you why we do it, how it lines up with our value, I can tell you what to expect, I can tell you that it's part of our missional priority for our vestry. That's a different sort of invitation than just, come to my church, I really like it. Right? This has a lot more meat on the bones. Let's take another one, the temple one. This is our physical priority. This is that great one that you gave, actually, about how beautiful our space can be. And so how are we, as a community, making that space a new priority for evangelism? Kind of like how we just workshopped a minute ago, right? What can we do for this to actually make it a priority that aligns with our values? So I wonder if somebody can lift up something that we can workshop as an example together in the group before we do that alone as individuals or as communities. What's something from today that you've discovered about your church that you want to bring out and start evangelizing because you know it's just gold in your church? It is a value, and it's something that your church does uniquely more than any other church. What's somebody walking away with today with one of those? Yes, please. That's right. Wow. Absolutely. To have a moment like that, especially something that's bilingual, this goes back to the uniqueness of that too, right? How incredibly important that is. So let's workshop this for a minute. Okay, we know that this fits our value of uniqueness, right? We know that this is something that we love and it brings us joy, and we know that if we didn't have it, the community would suffer, right? So we know this is a priority for us. So what are we doing to make this a priority that we will be able to evangelize? What sort of spiritual practices do we have around this? Do you have a team that maybe prays together beforehand? Do you have it itself is a spiritual practice, but is there a practice around the practice? Yes. Beautiful. That's excellent. And this is why I think it's flourishing, because you are not only praying together when you get together, you're obviously centering it all in prayer too, right? So that's the first thing. This is something that is taking up a spiritual practice to support it. Beautiful. The second thing is the trust, the relational priorities. You all have already told me that you are also reaching out to the community. The community knows you and trusts you to be a place where they will be welcomed. So you're making that a priority. Now, if it wasn't yet something that was trusted in the community, then that's something we might need to work to do, right? We might need to actually build some community trust, go out into the community and invite people, right? And then the temple. It sounds like your church has a designated spot for this, right? Like it is something that you have a real place for. And it's probably a treasure, as in a financial priority. It's somewhere in your budget, I would think, right? Yeah, like you all make space for it. Yeah, very good. So maybe it's something you can work on, right? That's right. Perfect. And then the talent, it is clearly where many of you in your church are putting a missional priority, right? You all are putting people towards this. This is why it's something that is so uniquely you, and why it's something that you can absolutely evangelize, because you're going to want people to know what is so great about that. Isn't that exciting? So we lifted this up as an example of what I would love for you all to do now for something in your own church. Pick one example of something that you would like to either start doing or do more of, that you want to make an evangelistic priority for your church. Pick something that you think can absolutely flourish and help you tell the story of your church now, in the present, and into the future. Go ahead and think about what it is, the one thing you want to start helping your church evangelize from today's conversation, and just write that down on your paper. One thing. This is the write it down part of the paper as well. Okay, with that one thing, I'm going to invite you to spend 5 minutes using that time, trust, temple, treasure, and talent, and say, where can I help grow this ministry? so that it can be something I can invite people into, like we just did, discussing this wonderful service that we were talking about. Go ahead and take 5 minutes and take that one priority and walk through these time, trust, temple, treasure, and talent priorities. Don't be surprised if in these conversations you find yourself thinking, I might need to start doing less of something in my church to support this. This is the time to also say what needs to be let go so we can embrace this ministry. All right, just take one more minute. If you'll all go ahead and wrap up the last thing you're saying. Do you have your hand up? Oh, just wrap up your final conversation and we'll be ready to come back when I see people are done talking. Okay, friends, gather back. Yes, do you have a question? Please.
So that last question was a really, really tough question. There's more to it than meets the eye.
Yes.
In the example of St. Paul's, founded in 1833, an agricultural community. For many decades, it was a community center, 2 services a day. There's all kinds of activity, all kinds of youth activity. The town is completely different. It's a bedroom town.
Yep.
Very often neighbors do not know each other's names. the days of social media where people don't learn any communication, in the days of helicopter parents,
Yep.
helicopter organizations, things have changed considerably.
Yes, they have.
But the old understandings are gone, and we don't understand what's going on.
Yes.
So I found your question extremely challenging.
Yes. Well, I'm glad it was meant to be.
No easy, no obvious answer.
No, there's not. And thank you for lifting that up, because if we think evangelism is easy, then boy, we probably haven't read the New Testament, have we? You're so absolutely right. And especially in the shifting time that we're in right now. You know, when you were talking, the thing that popped in my head is, what if your church became the place where people learned their neighbors' names? Boy, I would love to come to that church, the church where it's the place where I could come, because you're so right, we're all so in our kind of own little corners, but that was almost the tagline of your church, the place where neighbors meet. You know, like that might be a powerful part of the conversation that you and your church have. And I know the later part of the day has a chance to have some church demographic conversations too. For this very reason that you lift up, we live in such a pluralistic world that we have to be able to say what it is that they're going to find here at church in the great marketplace of what else they can find in the world. So thank you very much for lifting that up. It is a hard conversation. You all are brave for just coming here today. Remember where we started our conversation? People don't like to evangelize. Probably in the easiest sort of conversations, people still are nervous to evangelize. And it's not an easy time. So thank you for lifting that up. I really think that's important. All right, so what you have here with this conversation is a little bit of a template that you can go back to your parish and start to form how this works. We prayed together, we looked at our spiritual DNA, we reviewed our priorities, we started to write them down. We're going to pray at the end of our day as well. But what I hope you can see too is that this is not just an evangelism plan for your community, it's also for yourself. Because remember when we went back to the beginning of the day, the number one way people come to church is because we invite them by as individual invitation. What if every single day we woke up and prayed that God brought somebody into our midst that day to help us evangelize? If we did that with some seriousness, it would probably be very good for us to know what is our spiritual individual DNA as well. What do we believe? How do we believe it? How have we come to that place? Even if we're unsure of what we believe, what are the things that we value? What are the true strengths of our spiritual DNA? And then reviewing our priorities. How do I use my time? How do people trust me? Right? These become part of evangelism as well, because it's crafting a human being as well as a church that is open and welcoming to being able to invite people in. And you can go right down the list of those priorities and see how we want to be shaping ourselves as individuals as well. Then write them down. Actually write them down. The things that you value, the things that you want to stand for in your life, put them on your mirror at your over your sink. Or if you're in your church, put them on a bulletin board. You know, who are we? What do we value? So that there can be an inspiration that you draw on. It's also really good to start vestry meetings this way. You know, like, how are we living into our mission, our values as a vestry, the church leadership? You know, what priorities do we need to start and what priorities do we need to stop, you know, that are no longer priorities? And then finally, always be praying about this. Summarize these things so that they may be almost boiled down to a word or a phrase so that you can continuously be refining them and getting them very clear for yourself. This whole action of keeping it in prayer, being refiners of what it is God has given us, lets us be the people that God has called us to be. I want to leave you with this image as we wrap up this workshop today. You know, one of my favorite images in Scripture about who God creates us to be comes from so many of the prophets who describe God as a refiner of metal, of fine metal, right? And they often describe God as putting a metal into the fire and refining it such that all of the dross goes away, all of the impurities melt away, and you're left with this beautiful image of something precious, a precious metal. Now, for those of us who are not ancient metalsmiths, which includes me, what we sometimes miss in that is that an ancient refiner, such that the biblical tradition was reminding us of, had to get very intimate with that particular piece of fine metal. To be a refiner meant that you would put that metal in, but you would stay close to the fire, even if it was almost burning you. It's a sweaty, hard job. You would stay so close to that particular metal that as the impurities drew away, you kept the fire just the right temperature. So it wouldn't become melted all the way through, but also it would burn out the impurities. And the refiner knew that it was time to take the metal out when they could see their own face in it. When they could see their own face in it. So when the prophets point us to God as the refiner, what they're trying to say is that God keeps that fire of our lives burning just so that we are being created in God's image to the point where God could be able to see God's self, God's own face in our hearts. That's why I'm so passionate about evangelism. What God is doing in our community is shaping us through that fire of our life, through the centuries that have come down in your churches, the spiritual DNA of your place, as well as your own life, refining it, making it gold, so that God can see God's own face reflected in it. And we do that every single time we gather as the body of Christ, and we share in that blood memory. That's something I want to invite people to, into that same sort of refining fire that is the body of Christ and God's love. I hope that you'll be able to take today's lessons back to your church and start to keep that refiner's fire going as well, so that you bring those charisms that are so uniquely yours and your congregation that the world needs so desperately, and that they can shine brighter than any gold we can ever hope to see. Thank you, friends, very much for this time together. It's been really wonderful. I really appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you, and I think we're heading into lunch now.